Welcome. Thank you for being an overachiever this week and choosing to do the more difficult assignment on solving equations dealing with fractions. You've probably been kind of scared with fractions in the past. You think that it makes math a little more difficult. Hopefully after today you realize, well, we can just get rid of the fractions and make it just as easy as all of the other problems we've been dealing with. So that's the goal today, is to just wipe out the fractions, get rid of them, and then we won't be so scared of them. So, in order to wipe out fractions, one good skill to have is to be able to identify the lowest common multiple of the following sets of numbers. You've maybe heard the abbreviation LCM, least common multiple, lowest common multiple. All you have to do is find the multiples of a couple sets of numbers and find the smallest one. So let's look at the multiples of 8. We have an 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, and you could go on and on and on and on and on. And let's list the multiples of 12. We have 12, 24, 36, 48, and so on and so on and so on. But hopefully as we did that, you noticed, well, they already have one in common. And the one that they have in common is a 24. So the lowest common multiple of 8 and 12 is 24. Let's look at the next set of numbers. Let's start going by 2. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on and so on. If we count by 5s, we'll have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on and so on. And if we count by 10s, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on and so on. You'll kind of notice that every one of these multiples of 10 will also be a multiple of 5. So we'll deal with that in the next problem to make things a little easier. But the smallest one that they have in common was they all had a 10 in common. So the least common multiple of those three numbers would be a 10. Let's take a look at this. We have 3, 9, and 15. Now you'll notice that between 3 and 9, every single 9 that you have will also be a multiple of 3. If you have 9, it's divisible by 3. 18, it's divisible by 3. 27, divisible by 3. And so on and so on and so on. So right now I'm just going to deal with the 9s. So let's list out all the 9s. We have 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, and so on and so on and so on. If we go by 15, then we would have 15, we would have 30, 45, and hopefully you notice that we have one in common. That 45 would be the least common multiple. So go ahead and pause the video, try and do the next 3 on your own. When you're all done, come on back and we will start solving equations. And I'm back. Just as I was doing that last little segment, you'll notice my little stylus here, the eraser part or stylus part broke. So sorry, I can't really use this anymore. I'm gonna have to use my fingers. So hopefully I'll try and make it legible for you, but no promises. All right, we want to start by solving the following equations by clearing out the fractions. So what I'm gonna do here, and it'll get more difficult later, but I'm going to look at the denominator. And in this case, the bottom number of that fraction that I see it's a 4. So all I have to do to get rid of it is multiply both sides by 4. Because if I'm dividing by 4 and times by 4, those 4s are going to cancel out. And then that denominator is gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this side and multiply it by 4. And I'm going to take this whole side and multiply it by 4. So now what we're going to do is we're going to distribute. So we're going to take the 4 and multiply it to both of those. And we have 4 times 2x becomes 8x. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. And this is where the magic happens. If I take this 4 and distribute it, I'm taking 4 times 3/4 x. When you're dealing with fractions, the top number just means multiply, the bottom just means divide. So 4 times 3 gives you 12. Divide it by 4 is 3. So that becomes 3x, and then 4 times 9 is 36. So all of a sudden, we've taken a problem that has fractions in it, and now we've turned it into a problem that we should be really comfortable dealing with by now. We have variables on both sides. We're going to eliminate the smaller number, so we subtract 3x from both sides. And we're left with 5x minus 4 equals 36. You've probably done enough of these by now where I can skip a couple steps for you. You're going to add 4 to both sides, and then you're going to divide by 5. So if you add 4, you get 40. Divide by 5, you get x equals 8. So if you're comfortable enough to the point where you don't have to show your work for those last couple steps, that's all right with me. It means you get it. Let's go ahead and do one more. And now the fraction that I'm looking at is, it's got a 2 on the bottom. So since I have a 2 on the bottom, we're just going to multiply both sides by a 2. And then I'm going to take that 2 and I'm going to distribute it both ways. And 2 times 3 over 2x, you can take 2 times 3, that's a 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that's going to be 3x plus 2 equals 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 9 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. Once again, this looks way easier, so we can just move the smaller one. We're going to subtract 2x. And we get 1x plus 2 equals 9. And if you subtract 2 from both sides, you just get x equals 7. So those were intentionally a little bit easier. All we had to do is look at the denominator and then use that number to multiply. In a little bit, we're going to get to problems that are a little bit more difficult where you have to figure out a better number to multiply by. But for now, just try the next couple on your own. You're going to be multiplying by 5 on each of those. So go ahead and pause the video now, and then when you're done, come on back and we will work on the next set of examples. All right, hopefully those weren't so bad. Let's move on to the next couple examples. Now we have different numbers in the bottom of the fraction. So we have a 3 and we have a 6. This is why we worked on those least common multiples. If you had a 3 and a 6 and you were trying to find the least common multiple, you could list out the multiples of 3, and that would be 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on. You could list the multiples of 6, that would be 6, 12, 18, 24. And you'll notice that the least common multiple is, it's a 6. And that's what we're going to end up multiplying by on both sides. So let's clear those up. And we'll get back to it. And now we're going to multiply both sides by a 6. So now we're going to take that 6 and we're going to multiply it through. And if I take 6 times x, that's 6x, divided by 3 is 2x. And then 6 times 1 is a 6. Then I go over on the right side and we distribute the 6. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 divided by 6 is 5. So we get 5x. And then 6 times a minus 3 is a minus 18. And once again, we've taken that complicated looking problem and we've just made it look a whole lot easier. And then to solve it, just do what we normally do. Minus 2x on both sides. And we get 6 equals 3x minus 18. And again, you can skip some steps here if you can do it in your head. If you add 18 to both sides, this becomes a 24. And if you divide by 3 on both sides, we get an 8. One thing I do want to point out, way back here in this problem, you notice that this was written as x over 3. That means the same thing as if you saw 1/3 x. So if you see 1/3 x, it just means x over 3. They're synonymous. Similarly, if you see 5/6 times x, 5, 6x, another way of writing that could have been 5x/6. These mean the same thing. You might see them written differently, but just understand that they mean the same thing. And let's go on to our last one. Now we've got 4 different numbers. We've got a 4, a 12, a 3, and a 6. Let's list out all the multiples of 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on and so on and so on. Then we're going to list the multiples of 12. 12, 24, 36, 48. We're going to list some multiples of 3. That would be 3, 6, 9, 12. And the multiples of 6 would be 6, 12, 18, 24, and so on and so on. And hopefully you notice that they all have that number 12 in common. So the least common multiple of those numbers is a 12. That's the one that we're going to end up multiplying by. So we're going to take this left side, multiply it by 12, and the right side, multiply it by 12, and then just distribute it through. 12 times x is 12x, divided by 4 is 3x. 12 times 1 is 12, divided by 12 is 1. Then we go on the other side. 12 times x is 12x, divided by 3 gives you 4x. And 12 times 1 is 12, divided by 6 is 2, so minus 2. And once again, now it looks way easier. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. And we're left with 1 equals 1x minus 2. Add 2 to both sides, and we get x equals 3. I do want to point out one thing. Let's say you are really unsure of how to get that least common multiple. And let's say you were trying this last problem that we did. Let's say you found that a 24 is a number that goes into all of those. You could multiply by 24 and you're going to get the exact same number. So even if you're unsure with this 12 that we found, as long as you find a number that all of these go into easily, it would work. If you use 36, it'll work. If you use 48, it'll work. If you use 96, it'll work. If you use 105, it won't really work super well for you. So just try and find a number that all of them go into evenly, and you're going to be fine. The whole purpose is to wipe out a fraction, and any of those numbers would have done that. So that's how you deal with fractions. Hopefully you learned something, and give the next ones a shot. And then there's a small little check on the back to make sure you really understand it. But hope you have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you next time.